I've always been fascinated by crystals, chakras, and everything spiritual. There's something comforting about believing in the unseen energy around us and finding tools to harness it. My friends and family knew this about me, and my ex-boyfriend Sam in particular seemed to appreciate my interests, or so I thought. One day, Sam surprised me with the pendulum board. He mentioned how I admired one at the crystal shop we visited together. The board was beautifully designed, with intricate stars, moons, and symbols that seemed to glow in the light. I assumed it was from the same crystal shop and trusted it immediately. I started using it daily. At first, it felt like a harmless hobby. I'd hold the pendulum over the board and ask simple yes or no questions. Questions about my life, my future, and random things to test if something would move it. To my surprise, it worked. The pendulum swung, seemingly on its own, giving answers that felt oddly accurate at times. But almost as soon as I began using the board, I started noticing changes around me. Subtle things at first, like feeling watched. Whenever I was alone in my room, I'd get this strange sensation that someone or something was standing behind me, just out of sight. Then I began to see it. A shadowy figure was in the corner of my eye, continually vanishing when I turned to look. It wasn't just my imagination. It felt too real. The nights were unbearable. My room, once my sanctuary, started to feel oppressive. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I'd lie awake, staring into the darkness, convinced I wasn't alone. My mom dismissed it as my OCD acting up, saying I was overthinking and getting in my head, but I knew better. Things came to a head when my mom FaceTimed a friend of hers, a nurse who shared my interest in crystals and spirituality. They were chatting about life, and at some point, my mom decided to show her my crystal collection. When she turned the camera to my pendulum board, everything changed. Her friend's expression shifted instantly. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice sharp and urgent. "Where did you get that board?" she asked. My mom shrugged, saying it was a gift from my ex. "That's not a pendulum board," her friend said, her tone dead serious. "That's a form of a Ouija board." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. She explained that these boards are often sold online, disguised as spiritual tools, but they often function much like a Ouija board, opening doors to things beyond our understanding. I felt a cold chill run down my spine as she continued. She warned that I might have invited something into my space without realizing it. The figure I'd been seeing, the oppressive energy, it all made sense now. Her advice was clear. I had to burn the board and the pendulum immediately. I also needed to sage my room and verbally command anyone present to leave. That evening, I went outside, trembling as I carried the board and pendulum to our fire pit. As the flames consumed them, I felt something lift. It was subtle at first, like a knot in my chest loosening, but the real test came when I returned to my room. Following her instructions, I burned sage, walking around the space and repeating, "You are not welcome here, leave now." The heaviness that had plagued me for weeks started to fade. By the time I finished, my room felt normal, safe. The figure I'd been seeing, gone. Since that night, everything has been peaceful. I still use crystals and practice spirituality, but I'm far more cautious now. I'm 23 now, but this happened 2 years ago. It was around 11 p.m., though I can't recall the exact date. Even now, chills run down my spine when I think about it. I've only shared this story with 2 people in my life because even saying it out loud feels unsettling. Let me preface this by saying I'm not into paranormal stuff. I've always been a skeptic, the type to rationalize things or brush them off as coincidences. But what I experienced that night was something I can't explain. For context, I was in the basement of my house. It's a relatively new build, only 6 years old at the time, and I had never had any strange feelings about it. The layout is simple. There's a couch in the center of the room with a supporting post to its right and a wall to its left. To get to the washroom, you have to walk behind the couch, past the post, and down a short hallway. I was sitting on the couch that night just scrolling through my phone. At some point, I realized I needed to use the washroom. I stood up, walked around the post, and headed toward the hallway. That's when it happened. As I walked, I was suddenly struck with an odd, almost overwhelming feeling, like a voice in my head was urging me to turn around. It wasn't fear exactly, but more like an intense compulsion, and it wasn't something I usually do. So, I turned. And that's when I saw it. Standing on the opposite side of the couch was a human-shaped figure, but it wasn't solid. It wasn't made of flesh and blood. It was light. The figure glowed softly, blending in with the room's lighting, but it wasn't dim either. It had no face, no discernible features, just a humanoid form made entirely of pale, glowing light. It wasn't transparent. I couldn't see through it. It was just there, standing perfectly still, watching me. For a few seconds, we both froze. I stared directly at it, and I felt nothing at that moment. My heart didn't race. I wasn't scared. I was more fascinated than anything else. almost like my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Then it moved. The figure seemed startled, as if it hadn't expected me to notice it. In an instant, it sprinted to the opposite side of the room. It moved fast, faster than any person could, and vanished as it passed behind the post, completely. 1 second, it was there. The next, it was gone. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of what I had just witnessed settling in. My heart finally started pounding, and a cold wave of unease washed over me. What had I just seen? I didn't sleep much that night. I replayed the encounter over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination? But I was stone cold sober. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I haven't been overly tired or stressed. There's no history of anything unusual in my house. No tragic events, no old foundations, no strange energy. My family doesn't have a history of paranormal encounters or beliefs. And I don't have any deceased relatives who might be tied to the property. It's the only time I've ever experienced anything remotely paranormal, and I haven't seen or felt anything like it since. What unnerves me the most is how human it seemed. It didn't feel malicious, but it wasn't extremely comforting either. It was like a person caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, just as curious about me as I was about it. And yet, there was an instinctive understanding between us in those brief seconds, like it knew it wasn't supposed to be seen. I'll never forget that night. The image of that glowing figure is burned into my memory. And while I've stopped trying to explain it, the thought still lingers. What did I see? These scary stories are highly unnerving and unsettling, but their message is clear. Don't mess with the paranormal, or things will turn eerie. Hundreds of these stories are available, which stand as proof of the mischievous and paranormal beings. Have you ever experienced true paranormal activities? Let us know in the comments below. If you find this scary, then give us a thumbs up. Like and subscribe to the channel too. See you soon.